hum of the starship's engines thrummed through the floor beneath, a constant reminder that the vacuum of space outside was both unforgiving and silent. In the center of the medical bay, the alien warrior lay on a biobed that glimmered faintly under the overhead lights, her long ears twitching with each sudden vibration of the ship. The needles embedded along her back pulsed with soft blue light, each one a miniature conduit of alien bioenergy. She flexed her fingers in warmth, letting out a low, melodic hiss that sounded almost like a sigh. Honestly, do you humans ever get the hang of handle with care, or is that purely a suggestion? Her voice carried a peculiar accent, musical in its cadence, with just enough bite to make the soldier jump slightly every time she spoke. The human soldier, Thomas Marlowe, wiped his palms on his uniform, though it did nothing for the sweat sliding down his spine, and fumbled with the control panel. I'm being careful. I swear I've done this before, at least on holographic simulations. He glanced down at the alien's back, the faint sparks dancing from the needles making him flinch. One flicker, one wrong move, and he might end up not just ruining his career but also accidentally rearranging her internal organs. He winced at the thought. "Simulations do not scream," she murmured, a hint of humor threading her tone. "Or at least I hope they don't, although I imagine your instructors are highly entertaining when they do." Her ears twitched again, each movement slicing through the sterile air like delicate blades. Thomas couldn't help but notice how alien yet familiar she looked. Pale skin with a subtle iridescence, features strikingly human except for the elongated ears and slightly larger eyes that shimmered violet under the lights. She was beautiful, yes, but also terrifyingly strong, and right now very annoyed. He took a deep breath and forced his fingers to steady. Right, focus. One needle at a time, just stay still, okay? He reached for a control tool designed to stabilize the bio-needles, its surface humming faintly. Sparks of alien energy danced along the edges of the device, making Thomas feel like he was about to pet a particularly judgmental cat with electricity running through it. "Stay still. That is rich, coming from the species that falls over itself trying not to trip on air," she quipped, the corners of her lips twitching. "You're tense, you know. It shows in the way your shoulders hunch like a nervous little primate." Thomas froze, then gave a sheepish grin. "Primates are adorable," he muttered, and instantly regretted it when her head tilted, ears flicking in amusement. "Adorable? I did not know you humans considered near-fatal anxiety adorable." Her voice had softened, though, a subtle undercurrent of teasing that made him feel like he was being scolded by someone both terrifying and oddly charming. He exhaled and focused, letting the sound of the engines and the hum of the needles become a rhythm he could follow. A sudden jolt from the ship made him stumble forward and he accidentally brushed against her arm. She flinched, and then after a pause let out a laugh that was light and musical, almost like wind chimes. "Careful, soldier. You may touch me accidentally, but I shall not hold a grudge, not yet." Thomas chuckled nervously. "Good to know. That would have been awkward. Intergalactic incident number, what? Too many to count." She tilted her head again, the light from the needles casting flickering patterns across her pale skin. "I think we would have made quite the headline. Human clumsy, alien dignitary mildly electrocuted. A fine story for the history archives." Her humor was a thin veil over the discomfort she clearly felt, each pulse from the needles making her wince slightly. He adjusted his stance, trying to remember the procedural instructions from his training, but the thought of making a mistake kept gnawing at him. I don't want to hurt you, even a little." "You will not," she said firmly, though her ears twitched nervously. "I trust you. And yet, the irony that I must trust the species most likely to trip over the emergency oxygen supply is not lost on me." The room was filled with the hum of machinery and occasional sparks from the needles, and for a moment, Thomas imagined a space where this moment could have been normal. The alien lying calmly, the human operating with quiet confidence, a peaceful rhythm of work. But no, this was never normal. Not with interstellar politics, experimental tech, and her rather sarcastic commentary. He tried not to smile, but it was hard not to appreciate the absurdity of the situation. Minutes stretched, filled with quiet jokes, restrained laughter, and careful adjustments. Every movement Thomas made was measured, deliberate, and careful, the ship's low groan and the alien's occasional quips keeping him tethered between panic and focus. At some point, her humor began to break his tension. The absurdity of an alien warrior teasing a human into calmness, carving out small moments of levity in the oppressive atmosphere. Finally, after what felt like hours but was only a fraction of time, the first round of stabilization was complete. The needles glowed steadily, no longer flickering dangerously. The alien exhaled, a sound that was almost laughter mixed with relief. "Well, human, you have not killed me yet. I must say I am impressed." "Barely." Thomas gave a nervous laugh, running a hand through his hair. "Impressive is one word. Lucky is probably another." She tilted her head, eyes sparkling faintly. "Perhaps both. Perhaps luck is merely your way of describing human incompetence that somehow succeeds." Her ears flicked once, the movement precise and elegant. "Regardless, soldier, you may not have my eternal gratitude yet, but you have my grudging respect." And for a moment, amidst the humming machines, pulsing needles, and quiet humor, an unspoken bond began to form. An odd blend of trust, discomfort, and the faintest flicker of camaraderie between two beings from entirely different worlds, held together by necessity, humor, and the strange fragility of life in the far reaches of space. The ship's hull vibrated gently as it drifted through the nebula, the clouds of ionized gas refracting the light from distant stars into waves of shifting colors. In the medical bay, the alien warrior shifted slightly on the biobed, her long ears twitching in tandem with the faint hum of the needles embedded along her back. Thomas hovered nearby, fingers hovering over the controls of the stabilization device, though now he moved with a little more confidence. Each pulse of the needles cast a soft glow on her pale skin, turning her into a surreal sculpture of light and shadow, and he found himself momentarily distracted by the delicate arch of her ears, the way they twitched like antennae tuned to his every movement. "You humans really have a flair for dramatics, don't you?" she said, her voice carrying that same melodic edge, tinged with amusement. "All this fuss over a few tiny spikes of energy. I thought you would have more experience with minor electrocutions by now." Her long fingers flexed, brushing the edge of the bed in a way that made Thomas flinch. He swallowed. "Minor? There, supposed to be minor. I mean technically harmless mostly." "Mostly?" she repeated, raising an eyebrow. "That's comforting." A small, sarcastic smile tugged at her lips, and for a moment Thomas could almost imagine her teasing him in a quiet lounge somewhere, rather than lying half-suspended by alien bioneedles. He adjusted his grip on the device, trying not to notice the soft flicker of violet in her eyes, or the way her ears twitched with every subtle movement he made. The hum of the needles was punctuated by occasional sparks, a soft pop now, and then that made Thomas jump. Right, one adjustment at a time," he muttered under his breath, trying to convince himself that he wasn't about to cause catastrophic failure. "Just a tiny tweak." He reached for the nearest needle interface, and she tilted her head, letting a quip slip between gritted teeth. "Tiny tweak. Human understatement is always entertaining. Do you practice that in some sort of ritual?" Thomas blinked. "Ritual? Yeah, the ritual of not killing anyone with advanced alien tech." He gave a nervous laugh. She smirked, ears flicking with amusement, and Thomas realized he was beginning to respond to her humor instinctively, like a reflex. "You are oddly persistent for a species so prone to tripping over airlocks," she said. "I'll give you that." Her voice softened, a hint of warmth under the sarcasm. Thomas couldn't help but grin. "Persistence is the polite way of saying panic," he admitted, "and I panic a lot." Her laughter was quiet, almost musical, and it made the sterile medical bay feel less like a chamber of danger and more like a shared stage for absurdity and tension in equal measure. "Good. Then we are perfectly matched," she said, letting her head fall back against the biobed. "You panic, I endure. A symbiotic disaster of epic proportions." The ship jolted suddenly. A minor gravitational wave from a nearby asteroid cluster, sending him stumbling into the wall before he caught himself. She winced and then, after a beat, quipped, "I see humans have a strong sense of gravity, or perhaps just weak knees. Either way, impressive display." Thomas rubbed the back of his neck, a small smile forming despite himself. "Thanks. I think." He returned to his careful adjustments, feeling the rhythm of the pulses through the control interface, and noticing the way her breathing became a subtle guide for his timing. With each pulse, each gentle flicker of her long ears, he learned the cadence of her discomfort, the precise moment to act and the precise moment to wait. And all the while, her humor kept the edges of his panic from slicing too deep. "You know, this is not how I imagined meeting humans," she said suddenly, the tone almost casual. "In my fantasies, your species is more polite, less likely to drop tools onto my spine." "Well," Thomas said with a grin, "I tend to make an impression, mostly by accident, but still." She chuckled softly, the sound melodic enough to make him forget for a moment that he was manipulating alien bioneedles that could explode if mishandled. Her eyes glimmered as she looked at him, and the teasing tone continued. "Your species' idea of charm is unique. I will admit, it grows on one in extreme circumstances." Time stretched and compressed in odd ways within the bay. The hum of the needles became a rhythm he could anticipate, the occasional sparks almost like punctuation marks to their dialogue. Between the tension of life-or-death stakes and her sarcastic commentary, Thomas began to feel an unexpected camaraderie growing, subtle and strange, like a bridge across the void between their species. "You realize," she said suddenly, flicking her long fingers toward the control panel, "that if we survive this, historians will write stories about our sheer incompetence. Or your bravery. I'm still undecided." "Bravery sounds better," Thomas said with mock seriousness, "but I'll take incompetence if it keeps me alive." She let out a soft laugh, then winced slightly as a needle pulsed a bit harder than before. "You are infuriatingly human," she muttered, half to herself, half to him. "And yet I trust you. Do not ask me why." And so the hours passed in a surreal blend of sparks, needles, jokes, and growing trust. Thomas learned to anticipate her subtle shifts, the flick of her ears, the faintest hitch in her breathing, and to respond not only with technical precision, but also with the humor she demanded in small doses. The bond between them grew quietly, awkwardly, and with a lightness that belied the danger of the situation. A human and an alien warrior, united by necessity, guided by empathy, and bridged by laughter in the cold, unfeeling expanse of space. By the time the final pulse of the first stabilization cycle settled into a steady glow, Thomas felt a strange sense of accomplishment. She opened her violet eyes and regarded him, a teasing glint dancing in their depths. "Well, soldier, you may not have my eternal gratitude yet, but you have, at least, managed to annoy me properly without killing me. A rare skill among your kind." Thomas smiled, relief washing over him. "I'll take it." Her ears twitched once, a gesture almost like a salute, and in that quiet, pulsing glow of alien needles and the hum of the ship, a fragile, humorous, and improbable partnership began to take root. The ship shuddered violently. An unexpected gravitational wave from a passing pulsar cluster, rattling the hull and sending alarms screaming through the medbay. Thomas lurched forward, instinctively bracing against the edge of the biobed where the alien warrior lay, needles still pulsing faintly along her back. She groaned, a soft, melodic sound that made him wince in sympathy. "Really, humans," she muttered through clenched teeth, "you do know how to make an entrance." "I promise," he said quickly, "this is not how I usually start my mornings." The tension in his voice betrayed him, but her long ears twitched, the subtle movement conveying something close to amusement. Though apparently, it's a recurring theme in my life now. She let out a short, pained laugh. Recurring. I call it the human touch. Hazardous, unpredictable, and occasionally endearing. Her eyes flickered to him, a small glint of humor fighting through the strain of her discomfort. The situation escalated as the needles, already unstable, began to emit irregular pulses of energy. Sparks danced along their edges, and the blue glow intensified, bathing the medbay in a shifting, electric light. Thomas felt the sweat trickle down his neck, but his hands, now steadier than when this ordeal began, moved deliberately across the control panel. He adjusted the pulse dampeners, but one needle, a rogue one near her left shoulder blade, resisted his attempts. I don't suppose there's a "please, let me live" button on this thing, is there? He muttered, earning a brief chuckle from her despite the pain. Would you humans really know what to do with such a button if it existed? She shot back, her voice dripping with sarcasm. I think your species might push it with the wrong finger. Thomas suppressed a grin, even as his heart raced. Well, in that case, I'll settle for precision and a little luck. He studied the needle interface, noting the irregularity in the energy pattern, and realized that the only way to stabilize it without harming her was to remove it entirely, but doing so carried immense risk. Ah, finally. A dilemma worthy of my species' patience, she said, wincing as a spike of pain radiated through her back. Will the human finally rise to the occasion, or shall I simply die spectacularly while you panic magnificently? He paused, feeling the weight of the moment pressing on his chest. This was no longer just about following orders or avoiding mistakes. She had trusted him with her life, and now the choice rested squarely on his shoulders. He took a steadying breath, letting the rhythm of her pulse guide his hands, and carefully disengaged the rogue needle, manipulating the alien energy field around it to prevent a backlash. Sparks flew, a faint hiss of ionized air filling the room, and he held his breath until the needle slid free, the glow fading into a steady, safe hum. She exhaled sharply, the sound mingling relief and quiet admiration. Well, she said, the corner of her lips twitching into a smile, you didn't kill me, nor did you manage to electrocute me spectacularly. A definite improvement. Her long ears flicked once, almost like a salute, and Thomas felt an unfamiliar warmth at the small gesture. You trust me again? He asked, still gripping the controls, his voice barely above a whisper. I did before, she replied teasingly, though the sincerity in her eyes was unmistakable. And now, well, you have proven slightly less incompetent under pressure. That counts for something. She tried to sit up slightly, and he moved to steady her. Her violet eyes softened, and she allowed a rare moment of vulnerability to show. You humans are perplexing, dangerous, clumsy, and occasionally admirable. The tension broke further when a minor alarm chirped from the medical console, a false warning, merely a system recalibration, and Thomas exhaled a laugh he didn't realize he'd been holding. You see, false alarm. Just like half my life decisions. She tilted her head, a bemused glint in her eyes. Then perhaps your failures are fortunate. Her voice was quiet now, but the humor remained, a thread connecting them in the aftermath of the crisis. They lingered in the hum of the ship, the needles now stable, the medbay bathed in soft light. Thomas felt a shift inside himself, an awareness that his ability to act under pressure, to balance fear and careful calculation, had grown. The ordeal had been more than technical. It had been a test of patience, empathy, and trust. And in a strange way, it had taught him the weight and fragility of life beyond his species' perspective. You know, she said suddenly, breaking the quiet, if historians ever write about this, they will call it a triumph of human error and alien endurance. I, of course, will embellish your role for dramatic effect. I'll settle for a footnote, Thomas said with a grin, preferably one that doesn't include accidental near-death specialist. She laughed, the sound rich and musical, echoing faintly against the sterile walls. Agreed. Footnotes are far less dramatic, though perhaps less entertaining. Her long ears twitched in amusement, and she reached out a hand, letting him steady her as she rose carefully from the bio bed. By the time she stood fully, the pulsing glow of the needles had faded entirely, leaving only the faint traces of alien bioenergy lingering in the air. Thomas stepped back slightly, realizing that in saving her, he had gained more than technical skill. He had gained a companion, a confidant of sorts, and a deeper understanding of trust that transcended the fragile boundaries between human and alien. "I suppose," she said softly, "we have survived another day. Not bad for a human and a warrior." "Not bad at all," Thomas agreed, a grin tugging at his lips. "Though next time can we skip the needles part?" She let out a soft laugh, shoulders relaxing for the first time since he had met her.